Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to speak. And I have to confess, I almost misunderstood this event and the kind of audience that I'm talking to. I thought this would be another occasion of going somewhere and giving some kind of hope. So actually, twice out of 3 times we are being asked to do talks where the task is the prompt is to please give us some hope for the profession. And because I also have a background in ethics and compliance, and also have because I'm an engineer, I studied here, but I got my degree in '95. And in 1992 we had a seminar, a 2-semester seminar on neural networks already, which was nothing like what we have today. Back then it was possible to understand these. Now if you, these vector spaces are really a black box. I thought I would come here with a non-technical topic nevertheless, because of the diversity of the audience, and because part of the prompt that I clarified with Chilla in a phone call a couple of days ago while I was on the road was that this conference also deals with the human in the loop notion that exists in the application of AI technologies. And a few disclaimers. I've edited this slide deck while I was on the road, so that was a very unprofessional thing that I just did. I added my name here because I realized that no slides have their name or my email address, and that would have been a problem. The other thing is that is something that I've been thinking for quite a long time now, is that human in the loop is not enough. It's not good enough for me. It's not human in the loop, and I would like to quote a very dear colleague who works for RWS, makers of Strada Studio, Marina Pancheva. If you haven't heard of her, look her up, look at her presentations. She's a genius. And she came up with this human in the cockpit, human at the helm, human at the controls. Because any technology that we created and use must be done with the purpose of being controlled by humans and working to the benefit of humans. If these criteria are not met, the technology is not ethical to use or maintain. This is what many CAT tool providers were about. So even before large language models, there were a lot of automatic processes, but machine decided on what segments to offer you from the translation memory. Machine decided how to link together segments when you were performing the alignment of a source document with the target text. And many parts of the development of the translation environment was to provide the human with an acceptable user experience so that you can override and control these choices that were made by the computer. And this situation, the automated process, thanks to the large language models, got like several orders of magnitude more sophisticated, but the basic problem is still the same: how to put the human in the control. And what I'd like to talk about today is what I believe, I hate this word fate, what I believe the future holds for the language professionals. I will give you a definition very shortly. And how the application of AI might play out from the economic point of view. So I'm not talking about technology, where the technology can go, but what's happening with the language professions in society and what's happening to the technologies in the world of business, and how these two play together to change our status if you will. And recently I was asked to write about some best case scenarios. We are very good at talking about the worst case scenarios, and we are all being exposed to social media. We are all expert doom scrollers. And when you try to step out of this, then you don't talk about, you are not thinking about anymore about what those in power will do to us, what will be done to us, but we can talk about the kind of future that we want. And when we know what the future looks like that we want, that's the first step towards being able to actually take steps to bring that future about. So this is why I would like to, maybe this will be not as well structured as the other presentations were. Maybe there's going to be a considerable amount of rambling around, but I am trying to turn our thinking around about this. So what are the language professions? Translation, writing, editing, interpreting, I forgot that, sorry about that, and related lines of works. And there's a line of business called the language industry, but that definition is really narrow, because if you talk about the language industry, that's really about translation, localization, with interpreting on the side. It always comes up on the side when I've been involved in a couple of professional associations in the field, and there's always interpreting, that it's always on the side. But basically, this is not, the second part of this definition is not what I prefer, but what is understood most of the time. And basically, I'm talking about, today I plan to talk about 4 things. One of them is the status of translations through the EELISA, just at the level of mentioning how that changed, because it's not possible to separate that kind of change from what is happening to the world of translation because of not because of AI. So that's another, I believe it's a misconception. Whatever is happening to translation is not because of AI. AI is accelerating the process, but isn't the root cause. Second, let's talk a bit about the economics of AI, where that AI business is heading. What are some of the trends that we are seeing? I'm not going to give you a very confident prediction, but there are some pointers that point at some potential futures that are worth thinking about. Third, how do I see these professions could change or should change? And I'm going to give you a couple of examples why I think of that. And then I will give you 2 points about a best case scenario of humane AI. Humane meaning more accessible and understandable for the human user, and acting more to the benefit of the human user than it is today. So let's briefly tackle the status of translation. I'm not sorry about this, because this is what you see on the to you the left-hand side is one of the best translations, one of the best things that ever happened to Hungarian translations. But basically, the status of translation, let's talk about 19th century, early 20th century. Basically, for many nations in Europe, mostly in Europe, it was a definitive process of creating the nation itself, creating the national languages themselves. So there's a field of study called language policy. Einar Haugen, you probably heard about the guy. If you haven't, look him up, because he talks about language policy in terms of status planning. That's the kind of the how official a language is, what the status of a language is. Think of, for instance, I just flew in from Spain. And you know that Spain is a federal state with many languages spoken, but there's one central official language that is Spanish. There are many regional languages that are also official in their respective regions. And there are different, but also think of the dialects or the various languages that are spoken in Italy. That's much less official, to my knowledge, than this in Spain. And actually, the status planning of a language is kind of a societal project to enhance the status, the use of a language, while corpus planning is upgrading the language, the corpus of the language, so that it can be used as an official language. And that happened, for instance, we know about a couple of language renewal projects from the 19th century. One of these happened to Hungarian. And it was a highly successful one, considering that, to my knowledge, roughly 25% of the new lexemes that were created in that process, mostly in the first half of the 19th century, are still being used, which is a huge number. But this happened to Norwegian, it happened to Hebrew, it happened to many other languages for various reasons. And in that context, translation has a really high reputation, a really high priority. Because one of the ways of making a language work is using the language in theater performances. So that's why almost the entire body of works of Shakespeare were translated into Hungarian in the 19th century by multiple people, so that people can hear international literature in their own language. And if you look at the right-hand side of the slide, that comes from basically a box of plant-based milk with several languages on. So the status of translation, from shaping society, language, contributing to status planning and corpus planning of a language, became part of an industrial process. And that didn't happen because of AI, and it happened much earlier. There are many laws and regulations that require translation of technical descriptions, technical manuals into regional languages. For instance, you are not allowed to put a household appliance to the market in Hungary if you don't have all the technical specs, the repair manuals, and the user manuals in Hungarian. Same applies to cars, same applies to medicines and stuff like that. But that means that translation became part of the industrial process, producing those household appliances, cars and medicines and many other things. And an activity with a high societal status, basically being considered as art with high-level intellectual activity, is very different from an industrial process. But that's what most of translation has become. I'd like to make a detour here, because that status explains much of the many things, like the price pressure, the fuzzy match discounts that happen in the context of using translation memories in translation. CAT tools use translation memories and compute these proximity scores. That's what I would call a fuzzy match, because it's not really fuzzy logic, it's not really added distance, it's a special kind of indexing that was created mainly with the priority of making these proximity or similarity lookups quick and easy for software developers to program. It's not added distance, it's not fuzzy logic, it's something else. But it gives you a score about... and at the same time, if we look at the people doing translation, and all these people were exposed to these various technologies, and there was always a friction. And that is not a criticism to the technology, not a criticism to the people using or having been exposed to the technology, not a criticism to the people creating that technology. That's a friction that was waiting to happen. Because I have a degree in engineering and I have a degree in linguistics. And I think many of us here in this room are similar to me in that. And my dad is the same, but he was a linguist first and then got into computing. I did it the other way around, but that doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. The friction is not because one group of people is inferior to the other, but because there's an artificial gap between art and science. And this gap was created in the 19th century. There's some literature about it. I looked up something from the time people dealt with this, which was around 2000. My favorite article was removed from the internet just in the last month. That was a 2000 article written by researchers at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. And I have no idea why they removed that article. I hope I have it downloaded somewhere at home. But I've been using Perplexity Pro to find alternatives so that you can still read up on that. But there is an artificial gap between art and humanities that defines the societal status of both. And the proof that this didn't exist, well, there are a couple of examples. Think of Leonardo da Vinci. He designed tanks, helicopters, and made the Last Supper. And by the way, there's a very, very good exhibition about him in Milan in the Museo Nazionale di Scienza e Tecnologia. Tecnologia? Does it exist in the name? I don't remember. I really suck at remembering names, even in my own language. So, but basically, that kind of gap will actually define a lot of how the two groups, creators of technology, and the people who use technology in humanities will understand or not understand each other. And that is really important to keep in mind. And the other side is that we are exposed to AI. And as Levente said, when we talk about AI today, well, I will return to that a bit later, we think of large language models. And so we can see, we can say that these are the plumbing of AI. These are the basic infrastructure that we all need access to so that we can write our prompts, we can get our responses, and basically have the outcomes that we hope from them. This is some kind of a gas distribution thingy from Montreal, Canada. But these are disclaimer, there is only one photo, one image in this presentation that was AI generated. Everything else it was photographed by myself. So not even stock photos. But the question is that we are talking about 4 companies who run the publicly available AI models or the data centers making them available. Can we count on these on the long run? Because what is pretty sure is that we can't control these companies. So, and there are some trends here, which would be worth looking at. One of them, sorry, I didn't have a. That's the United States Census Office. That shows that the AI adoption is in decline. Now, Csaba was very right that if we can say that 90% of AI projects fail. By the way, it was 85% for any software development project in the mid-90s. So these numbers look pretty constant to me. then obviously the enthusiasm in the world of business will decline. But if the enthusiasm at business declines, that means that the potential of earning money from this, from providing AI, also declines. And this is why money speaks. There's another way, in addition to what Csaba said, there's another way that pensioners' money is used here, and that's called private equity and venture capital. These are two different types of investment, depending on where a company is at its life cycle. But basically, these are investors who handle the pensioners' and money and other private investors' money, so that these pensioners and private investors can make the maximum return. Now, the private equity, the investment firms, will only look at the potential returns. So if it turns out that they cannot get the 5-fold return in 7 years, for instance, from a level of investment, they will move away from this line of business. We have seen it we are seeing it right now in software as a service projects. The multipliers, the enthusiasm of investors is going down like this. And the same might happen to the AI providers. And that might happen before 2030. There is also some information of how these things are priced. Márton mentioned the optimization of sending like 100 queries to a large language models at the same time. And there are cases when, for instance, if you're a software provider, you need to send more and you need guaranteed throughput of prompts and traffic through a large language model. And when you want a guaranteed throughput, the price goes up. But not 2-fold, 4-fold, but maybe it's in the range of thousands. And if it turns out that AI providers are not able to make money, and someone mentioned the environmental impact, and when we talk about the environmental impact, we also talk about the price of the energy that the operators of data centers need to pay. So these are not cheap things to run. One of the potential futures, I'm not saying that's the most likely, but that's also possible, that the smallest players will be priced out of access to professional level AI services. That's one possible future. I'm not saying it will happen, but it's a possibility. And what will happen, at least in my opinion, is that some of the AI services that we take for granted today will become unavailable in the next 3 to 5 years. I don't know which of them are. Maybe they are the ones that I have, as a private person, I'm using 3 AI providers, I'm not saying which. Maybe those will be the ones that become unavailable. I don't know. And back to the convergence. Status of translation changing, the emergence of the AI, the availability of professional level AI services, is that it's not translation they need. They need a certain content in several languages at the same time. They don't care if the multiple languages are created by AI or by means of translation. Translation is secondary. And that has been my concern, increasingly has been my concern over the last couple of months, that people who decide on spending corporate money, translation is not something they understand. What they understand is multilingual content. What they understand is they must be present in several different countries, several different geographical regions, and they must be able to speak the regions. That this is achieved through translation or something else, they don't care. So translation as a line of business is not sustainable in the sense that we are not able, never have been able to pitch translation to an owner or a manager of a corporation. It's not possible. They won't understand. What they will understand is multilingual content. And so if you translate only and you don't control the source material, then whatever you do is secondary. And there's a lot of talk of translation companies' revenues going down. Why? Because we are, because part of our business as MemoQ is selling translation management system subscription to translation companies. And if someone else controls all the work that you get, and they decide of the volume of translations being sent to translation companies, that's basically you have no means of controlling your market. But then again, language and content is important. So this is where my argument comes, the language professional, especially when you talk about language industry, remember my second slide. They define themselves too narrowly because human-generated content is more important than ever. But it's human-generated content. So that means that if we target AI translation, yeah, I think I just compressed it into one slide. Yeah, this is the price of doing your slides on the road. If you target AI translation with criticism and skepticism, but you don't target AI-generated content, you are missing the point. And that was an article that I read last night, basically. So this is a lot of things that I don't have on my slides because these things are emerging as we speak. Because there's a lot of unmarked AI-generated content that gets fed back into the training data of AI models. And this is talk about that. The quality of AI models. Someone mentioned in the coffee break that, yeah, sometimes I look at the model and all of a sudden it's worse. And yeah, that's a thing, that happens. If you look at the analysis of what GPT-5 is doing compared to GPT-4, there are a lot of quality problems there. And this is one of the reasons, just one, not all of the reasons. But in order to keep the AI models up, some of the content that they are being fed as training materials should be human-generated, human-created. There's no way around that. So, and it's a very important thing, and my time is running very short, so I will try to give you the most important thoughts here, is that, yeah, we talk as AI that is synonymous to large language models, but this is not technically true. Because AI is not large language models, and this is something that I've been advocating for. It's called minimum automation. If there's something that you can automate with less than a large language model, you should go that way. For instance, example from MemoQ. MemoQ has a pretty, that's a feature of MemoQ no one knows. A pretty efficient predictive typing feature that has been there for almost 10 years now. It's based on a very simple statistical algorithm called, I think it's a hidden Markov model, and that's it. This is very efficient, very fast, consumes very little energy. It's very efficient when used in connection with human typing the text or editing the text. There's no way we are going to replace it with a large language model. A large language model might be able to give you slightly better suggestions there, slightly better suggestions at 10,000 times the energy and time cost. Why would I want to replace that? And you can think of a lot of other things here. So that's an important part. But back to here, there's a future I prefer, and it's it seems that this future is also necessary for AI to remain sustainable. Because if we lose human-generated content, we will eventually lose the AI models too. And that is something that maybe AI companies are not thinking about. I'm doubting it very seriously, but I haven't talked to them, so they can think anything, for all I know. Precisely because of what I've said just now, the content of the highest value will still be created by human language professionals. In the future, I prefer AI is not a super brain that is there to be your companion or replace humans in any kind of professions. But where I expect AI models to evolve is that they become more capable of logic than today. So the large language models are the single most unpredictable technology humankind ever created. Sensitive to truth by design, and they do not are not designed to imitate a person. There was a time, and computers have always been anthropomorphized, so it's not a very special attribute of large language models. People have been looking at computers as some kind of persons before that. I've seen that with my students. I've been teaching translation technology. I had been teaching translation technology from the late 1990s to the mid 2010s, and I still do occasional stints. I've been experiencing that with my students in the early 2000s. These are and I don't know how large language models could evolve into something like this, but this is an evolution of technology I would welcome. But language professionals also need to evolve. Yes, this is the only AI-generated image in this presentation, by the way. This is a mural in Montreal. But language professionals also need to evolve, partly because they define themselves too narrowly. And the other thing is our profession doesn't define us. And I had to make a lot of left turns, hard left turns in my career, simply because there was another position that no one else was willing to fill, so I had to learn the profession. This is how I became a compliance person, for instance. And I don't think it is normal for a human being to stay in a single line of work in their entire life. So that's something that precisely because of our world looks like. So if you haven't heard of this acronym BANI, B-A-N-I, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible, this is one of the descriptions of today's world as far as our working and living conditions are defined. Look into that. I don't have time to explain, but that was the main theme of MemoQ's all-hands team building exercise 2 weeks ago. How to cope in a world that is unpredictable, in many cases adverse to us, and much more unpredictable, much more uncontrollable than before, much less safe. And the key is human adaptability, but this is something where we also need to change our thinking, myself included, because the safe spaces that we believed are safe spaces don't exist anymore. And AI is just one of the factors here, like I was trying to illustrate here. And I'm not saying we should be happy about this. What I'm saying is we need to be conscious about this, that okay, the world is worse. What can we do about it? How can we conceptualize? How can we systematically think of what we can still control and try to control those things. And that is important in the changing world. To the language professions, I say that let's define ourselves in a wider form, and let's think consciously about what we can control. But before that, we need to know what kind of future we want. So this was kind of an illustration of that, and I overstayed my welcome by 5 minutes, so apologies for that, and thank you very much for your attention.